Okay, so I want to talk to you about a statement that has now come up in the press made by SN Subrahmanyan, who's the chairman managing director of Larsen and Toubro. Now, this has come up on Reddit. It is an undated video in which he's addressing some sort of Q&A to employees. And one of the questions that's come up from an employee to him is, why is Larsen and Toubro, which is such a big company that does so well, making employees work on Saturdays? To which Mr. Subrahmanyan responds saying, I actually regret that I can't make you work on Sundays. He goes on to say that employees should work 90-hour weeks if they're going to be successful. And then in remarks that have come under a fair amount of criticism, he says basically, what are you going to do sitting at home? How much are you going to stare at your wife? How long are wives going to stare at their husbands? Get to the office, start working. He then went on to say that he had a conversation with a Chinese professional who was extremely confident that China was going to beat the US because, and I'm quoting here, he said, in China people work 90 hours, whereas Americans only work 50 hours. And he basically said, and I'm quoting, if you want to be on the top of the world, you're going to have to work 90 hours. Now, this is my issue with the statements that were made, right? I think that it displays, first of all, a lack of understanding of labor laws. In India, labor laws specify 9 hours, 8 to 9 hours a day with breaks, a maximum of 48 hours on factory floors. Anything above that involves payment of overtime, which is twice your normal pay. So obviously there seems to be an abandonment of that idea in the private sector, especially for white collar jobs where you're just expected to work and work and work and work. And we've had these conversations in the past. Secondly, this conversation, this statement about what are you going to do, stare at your wife at home, or wives are going to stare at their husbands at home. It betrays sexism. And quite frankly, boomer generation sexism. The idea that when you go home, you're just staring at your wife because you have nothing to do is a really outdated idea. Because today, Mr. Subrahmanyan, couples are doing it together. Both husband and wife are working, which means that when they come home, there is a home to run, kids to look after, schoolwork to be done, doctor's visits, parents who are elderly who need help as well, pets who need to be taken to the vet, taxes that need to be paid, a lot of work, grocery shopping that needs to be done over the weekend. A lot of this is divided between the couple and done together. It's no longer a case where you are working 90 hours because your spouse is holding that fort down at home and doing it all on her own. That is an outdated concept, and I think this particular statement actually betrays a lot of sexism, which sort of struck me quite sharply. I think also when the head of the organization makes statements like this saying, what are you going to do? You have to come out, you have to work. This trickles down with every level. It gets pushed further and further. And that's when we have mental health issues that, comes up at the bottom where people are getting pushed too hard because they're just starting off. And things get said like, if you don't do it, somebody else will take your job. You're so lucky to have this position. You have to work really hard if you want to stand out among the crowd. That's where all of these ideas come from. And finally, the idea of if we want to beat China and if we want to beat the US, we're going to have to work 90 hours. I think, again, there's a generational gap here because I think this has to do with 1991, post and pre. People who were born after 1991, which is the liberalized India, which is the India that we live in today, do not feel that kind of desperation that we have to kill ourselves working in order to be at the very top. This sort of, competitive capitalism, which is a pre-91 idea. And I think that there is a post-91 idea, which is where there's a generational gap between maybe the Gen Zs and the people who are running the offices that the Gen Zs are working in. Leave me a comment in the comment section if you think that there is in fact a gap between how people actually approach their jobs these days and whether this idea of we have to just continuously work, because think about it, if we're talking about 90 hours a week as he has recommended, which goes so much further than the 70 hours that Narayan Murthy had actually talked about, then we are saying, 90 hours a week, 70 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 hours a week, 7 days a week, 13 hours a day? Is that the breakup that he's talking about? Basically, that's nearly all of your waking hours spent in the office, including Sundays. Is that even a tenable thing to be said in jest also? And are we still running organizations, some of the largest in the country, some of the most profitable in the country, where the aim is to reward shareholders? Is this how these organizations are being run, with the idea that we have to work as hard as possible? We have to really, break those hours in order to beat everybody else and be on top of the world, in order to reward our shareholders? Is that the top of the world that we're referring to? Are these the questions that people are asking right now? Leave me a comment in the comment section if you believe that there is a generational gap here in the ideas that are being talked about. And if you think this is something that's going to lead to, we're no longer even talking about work-life balance if you're talking about 7 days a week. We're talking about mental health, and we're talking about the kind of impact this will leave on employees who are hearing the top of their organization actually, air out statements like this. Tell me what you think in the comments.